the WGA strike has ended this week. Happy days if you're a writer in Hollywood.
Great.
Perhaps not so much if you're a consumer, because the things that they've conceded on the studios really don't seem like it's going to raise the quality of the product that they're producing. The biggie was having a minimum number of writers in the writer room, and they wanted that number bumped up. So yeah, just giving people stuff to do, regardless of whether they're contributing anything good. It's just having more people on hand. I mean, Paul, you've worked in the industry for a long time. I guess you understand the issues at stake more than the rest of us. Like, what's your take on the strike and the resolution to it?
Well, I can't talk to the length of the strike. There have been people who have said that a lot of the bits and pieces in the final proposal were worked out quite a while ago. And why people didn't tighten their belts and finish it off earlier, that's really the big question between all the powers that be, whether it's the WGA or the AMTP, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I took a look at the summary, and the writers have come out great. And it doesn't look like the producers were fighting it that badly. Now, off the top, just so you know where people started, the initial WGA proposals, they wanted a $429 million value deal. The initial AMPTP offer was $86 million, and they settled on $233 million. So about halfway, just from in terms of the total deal. But I'm more familiar with the Canadian contracts, but there's the stuff in here is like absolutely reasonable. I mean, I didn't think it was bad for either side. I read it. I'm going, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's good. That's not painful. Oh, they've given the writers, the ability to audit what the numbers are for streaming shows. Oh, and if it hits certain targets, like 20% of the total viewership of any particular streamer, you're going to get a really significant bump up in pay. Wow. I was really quite amazed on how decent this contract is.
There is quite a strict confidentiality element, though, too. So anyone hoping that, well, since they're divulging streaming numbers to the unions, we might actually learn what they are, then no, the contract is very quite specific on those must be kept strictly confidential to the union. So higher chance of them leaking, I guess.
Of course.
With the audience and the consumer is still not going to be able to get a sense of how these things are actually performing.
But do we really need to know those numbers? I mean, it's, the people who are getting paid need to know them more than us.
Well, I think
I would love to know how many people watch She-Hulk.
Yeah, well, I think how many times you've heard a studio come out and say, I think they did it with Velma, didn't they? So it's HBO Max's #1 animated original premiere. And so, well, you're making a big advert claim there. And in a bid to get more people to watch it, you're telling us that it is quite popular. Amazon did much the same thing with Rings of Power. If you're going to make that part of your advertising campaign, then yeah, as a consumer, I do kind of want to know where you're getting your numbers from. Are these actually real, or are they being manufactured very creatively to boost the impression of the show that you really want to make buck? And yeah, I would like to see those figures. Whether or not we need to know them, of course, it's up to everybody else, but I would like to know them.
Well, Nielsen is getting better, and Samba is getting better, and as the streaming services, which don't seem to be disappearing. To me, I had mentioned a long time ago that the biggest sticking point was the fact that the beautiful, well-greased conveyor belt of money-making, remuneration for all these different properties went up front, movies to DVD or VHS, and then onto TV, and then into the remainder bin. I mean, we were just used to the chugging along of that money-making machine. It was easier for the studios and the unions to kind of grasp just where the money was. Although, yeah, there were sneaky accounting practices, of course. But now with streaming, it's still a weird weird thing that isn't really making money for anybody except for maybe Netflix and Hulu. So to me, that's a weird part of this entire process, and they're not going away. In fact, they've created an alliance called the SIA to lobby governments to make sure that specifically they don't get the same kind of treatment as internet providers and YouTube, because they've got different rules that they got to work under, and they don't want the streaming services to be brought under those internet rules.
Right. Yeah. I guess not all streaming services are exactly flourishing. Like we know Disney Plus is losing subscribers.
Disney hasn't made a profit yet.
Yeah, I mean, because it was going to be the next big thing for them, and yeah, it was great while everyone was locked down and they couldn't go out. But now that movie theaters have reopened and people are going out again, it's just like, well, no, it's not really taken off the way you hoped.
The existence of Disney Plus has ruined Disney's movies as well, because no one really goes to watch them anymore. You just wait till you can stream them.
Yeah,
Little Mermaid had the biggest opening on Disney Plus right now, but like it was a flop in the box office.
Yeah,
and all the Pixar movies the same way. No one's watching them, right? And it just keeps happening.
Well, I think with their movies as well, they're not event movies anymore.
No,
particularly in their case. So, like, there isn't a great drive to go see them. It's like, you know, with the Marvel films, there used to be that. Like, you had to go and see it when it hit the movie theaters because, like, everyone was going to be talking about it. Now they're not. And so, like, you can quite easily just leave it until it hits streaming.
I think they're not event movies because they're just bad movies. They could have.
Well, there is that.
Money. Only three of them made money past Endgame.
It's going to be interesting.
Just Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Everything else is pretty much flopped or done average.
So, but that's why I don't understand why they're getting into bed with each other to be an industry lobby group, a trade group, when maybe like Netflix would just wait them out and let them all die. I mean, so the only two groups that are not in this trade organization is Apple and Amazon. So it's a weird. It's funny that all these money bags get together over martinis and decide, hey, you know, we're enemies, but let's have a trade group. Sure, Chauncey, that sounds like a great idea.
Do you believe
that tackling bigger issues, I suppose, like rather than just competing against each other, because that's, you know, that's like an existential kind of threat if you know, the entire streaming platform or the streaming model is under threat. Well, none of them can function then. Yeah,
so this is why I'm really curious what SIA is, what they're up to, because it's not a very strong organization from a financial perspective.
I mean, the great news, though, I guess, is that late night talk shows are going to come back. Everyone's thrilled about that, aren't they? Like, have you missed Jimmy Fallon? Have you missed Bill Maher?
Yes.
I still can't believe they had people in like Pfizer vaccine costumes dancing. I can't believe that's a real thing that happened.
That was a low point in our culture.
I still watch Maher. I'll still watch Maher, but I have not watched anybody else.
No.
I did kind of laugh at the whole, like, when people compared Drew Barrymore, like, and coming back from, like, right at the 11th hour, just like destroying her reputation by trying to like go across the picket lines to start her show up again, like literally a few days before they reached the deal, and getting all this heat when she totally didn't have to. Yeah, she was compared to like the family at the end of The Mist. They all, like, they commit suicide and it's like just before they get rescued.
You know, the actors strike is that the Film Actors Guild is still striking, and one of the reasons for that is they have generally been a lot more vociferous than the Writers Guild have. Like all the quotes coming out from their particular meetings, because it actually does sound much like the Film Actors Guild from Team America in the way that they conduct themselves. But so like the head of the negotiations is also an actor and prone to giving these huge, very bombastic speeches comparing their strike to the fall of the Bastille, for example.
You mean the nanny?
It's like,
you mean
the nanny? Calm down a little bit.
But which you can understand why that's not very conducive to negotiations. But there's also the difference, and it goes back to the streaming thing as well, because the demands are very different. So with the writers are effectively demanding higher residuals and higher minimums. And actually, if you compare their original demands with the ones that they've got, they have pretty well succeeded on every single headline item they wanted. Whereas the actors, as I understand it, are campaigning still for a much higher share of just revenue And so that's like irrespective of profit, and none of these films are making profit anyway, you will pay us a lot more money. And I can't really see the studios backing down on that one anytime soon, because that would actually cost them. The writers' demands, by and large, most of them seem reasonable enough, with the exception of the minimum staffing requirements one, which they probably is one of the biggest victories they had, because the studios originally didn't even counter-propose when they said that. They just said no.
But that's been halved. That's been halved.
It's only half. It's not half, because they wanted minimum of
6.
4 senior writers and then 6 actual writers, and now it's gone to 4 senior writers and 3 actual writers. It's like it's almost half, but not quite. That's a terrible idea, but at least it's not too expensive. But it does mean that you're probably going to get fewer new writers on the scene, because it costs more to hire them. And
in the writers' room, they're splitting the budget. They're not really negotiating their own individual salaries. It's that the writing room gets a budget and then they split it.
Well, but they're not talking about a base salary of like 14 grand a week for these writers.
There's a base.
Because it was 10 before, now it's like gone up by about 40%, so it's like 14 grand per week. Man, if I was making 14 grand per week,
that'd be nice.
Absolute dog shit, like I would be a happy guy.
I made a whole video about that, the whole like you get what you pay for kind of a thing. Like, people got really mad when McKenyu from One Piece got paid 1.76 million for the One Piece live action show, and Tatiana Maslany got 450,000 for She-Hulk. It's like, well, no shit, she did.
I know who I'd rather invest in.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you think about it, like McKenyu made more money on One Piece than the rest of his main cast combined. But
I mean, I guess
it makes sense.
Part of the problem is he's not well known in the West, but he's a big star in Japan, isn't he?
Correct. Yep.
Huge. Yeah. Like 5 million on Instagram alone. Like when you pay that money, you're not just paying for him, you're paying for his whole audience to come watch. Right. Yeah. So, and it worked obviously because One Piece was a huge success. So good for them.
But for the actor's point of view, as we mentioned, they're demanding. Some of their demands did overlap with the WGA, which is fair enough. But like they are expecting a lot more in terms of revenue and pay increases. There was a lot going on in terms of like audition tapes and stuff, like how they want guarantees around not having to do too much for their auditions because they can become quite time consuming, and they're quite open to abuse as well, like for obvious reasons. So there's things like that, and I don't know realistically how much longer they'll stay out on strike. I know they're scheduled to
expand it, so they're now threatening to expand it to cover video game studios as well, which is not a good idea. I mean, they really don't have very much leverage where video game studios are concerned. Like maybe for most video game studios. Well, they are much, but that's the point. They're much more internationalized. Not all of them have the same collective bargaining agreements that film studios have. But even if they do, there's nothing really to prevent most game studios from just hiring overseas or filling in the gaps with scratch audio until the strike's over. So like, I don't really see that they have much leverage in that one. And it's questionable how much leverage they have with the rest of it either, given that the writers wanted to have in part of their strike agreement this contractual right to support the strikes of other unions, and the studios vetoed that. And that's now not in there. So the writers can't go on strike in solidarity with the actors anymore. So actually a lot of production can carry on going.
They've been asked to do so.
They've been asked to do so, but they have no contractual right to do so. So if they were to do that, they would be in breach, as I understand it anyway, of their employment contracts going forward.
Hasn't been signed yet, Platoon.
Not yet. No, they could still reject it. And then the other interesting one was the AI aspect of it as well, because they've reached an agreement on that where they've apparently drawn up these regulations that prevent AI being used to source scripts, rewrite source material, be classed as source material. And the Writers Guild, I think, has a say on whether writers' materials are allowed to be used to train AI to write things in future. So like that overlaps a bit with the actors, because the actors are also campaigning on AI for image rights and things like that.
Yeah, for the most part, AI has been expunged from the writing game.
For now, anyway.
For now.
It's negotiated every 3 years, so let's see where we're at 3 years from now when AI's had all that extra time to advance. Thanks for watching this clip from Open Bar. This is just a little reminder that the Critical Doggo plush is still available to pre-order. There's a few days left in the campaign, so if you want to order one, now's the time. Either way, I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.